You and our Commander-in-Chief left people behind. You left those in your care behind. You left Americans and our allies behind. Your delayed appearance before this committee, I think, is a disgrace to those Americans who did die in Afghanistan, and your decisions or the absence of leadership on this issue during the withdrawal of 2021 are directly responsible for the disaster. You know, as a global war on terror veteran who served in Afghanistan, I want to once again recognize the sacrifice of all the Americans that fought for our country in Afghanistan. I lost friends there. But those of you who came home, your service was not in vain. Those of you who died there, your service was not in vain. You helped keep our country safe for 2 decades. And I am grateful for your sacrifice and the sacrifices of your families. As a Night Stalker flight surgeon and an Army Ranger infantry officer, I remember our most sacred creed, leave no man behind. Secretary Blinken, you and our Commander-in-Chief left people behind. You left those in your care behind. You left Americans and our allies behind. Your delayed appearance before this committee, I think, is a disgrace to those Americans who did die in Afghanistan, and your decisions or the absence of leadership on this issue during the withdrawal of 2021 are directly responsible for the disaster. Prior to President Biden's go to zero approach, the Taliban had ignored U.S. attempts for a smooth exit and shown themselves totally ignoble negotiators. We knew the dangers, and yet, as the military withdrew, you told U.S. Embassy Kabul to remain. Furthermore, you actually increased personnel. When senior security advisors and leaders at DoD and embassy staff said it was time to make a non-combatant evacuation operation plan, an EO plan, you said no. Instead, when the day came for the embassy to evacuate, there was no plan. You left your personnel high and dry to figure it out on their own. In fact, you never even issued the NEO. As Secretary of State, that is your responsibility, but instead the NSC had to make that call. Did you step in? No. The NSC continued to lead the initial response, including decision-making regarding Afghan population eligible for evacuation, which should have been states' responsibility. Because you weren't at the helm, there was little documentation or communication. State personnel had to rely on spur-of-the-moment decision-making just to get to the airport, and thousands of evacuees were left in limbo. Now, I also want to share a story, a conversation I had with the leader of one of our greatest allies, Britain. I had a conversation with Boris Johnson 6-8 months ago. I was at dinner with him, and I asked him, I said, hey, could you confirm a rumor, Mr. Prime Minister? Could you confirm the rumor that the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, Joe Biden, you called him and asked him to stay an extra 5 days, just 5 days, so that all the Brits could get out? And Boris Johnson told me, Chairman Green, I remember exactly where I was when I made the phone call. I asked for 5 more days, and President Biden told me no. This is our greatest ally on the planet, participating in the Red Sea with us against the Houthis when few others would. I pulled wounded British SAS guys off a target in Iraq. Their blood was on my hands. And I'm going to tell you, that relationship is, it's one of our greatest, if not our greatest. And yet we slapped them in the face and said, no, you don't get 5 extra days to get your people out. This according to the Prime Minister of England at the time. I find that unconscionable. And senior leaders at DoD have come here and testified. Senior leaders at DoD have testified on the HASC and told us, we were telling the State Department 4 or 5 months in this drawdown period, get your stuff together, and they didn't. Why?
Mr. Chairman, I hope you give me time to respond, because I dispute virtually everything that was said, with great respect, though, for the member and particularly for his extraordinary service to our country. First, did we leave people behind? No, we got them out, including after the deadline of our evacuation. By the time we got to August 31st, we had, as I said, several hundred Americans who were left, who had identified themselves to us as wanting to leave, but could not get to or into the airport. I committed to make sure we got them out, and between the end of the evacuation and the end of the year, we got the 500 remaining Americans out who either then or after August 31st identified themselves as wanting to leave. We made good on that commitment. Telling the embassy to remain open. Yes, we all wanted the embassy to remain open. It was fully our expectation that the Afghan government and the Afghan military would not collapse. It was the desire of Congress to make sure that we remained engaged in Afghanistan, including to look out for our own citizens, including to make sure we were doing right by the SIVs. And it was fully our intention to continue to bring them out by keeping the embassy open. And as I've said earlier, and as many others have testified, no one anticipated the collapse of the forces. No one anticipated the collapse of the government. When it comes to the NEO, again, let me be very clear. The State Department initiated the NEO. We did. That's what the record reflects. But this is a collective decision. As a instrumental matter, the State Department initiates it by requesting it of DOD. The decision to initiate it was a decision taken by the NSC and ultimately by the President. Not once before we initiated the NEO did anyone say, you need to do this among the principals in the administration. It was a collective decision on the 14th of August. Those capitals, provincial capitals, started to fall on the 6th, and by the 14th, we decided that the NEO was imperative. Now, there's a reason, Congressman, that it was so important that we focus on this. The Ghani government was pleading with us throughout the summer, don't engage in an evacuation. That will actually precipitate exactly what we're trying to prevent, which is a collapse of the government, a collapse of confidence, people fleeing the countries in uncontrolled ways. So that was also part of our thinking. But in terms of preparing, yes, we started preparing intensely going back to April. Multiple exercises with different agencies, tabletop and otherwise, planning through different scenarios. We had tripwires, we had indicators, all of which came into effect. We moved the embassy in 48 hours to the airport. That wouldn't have happened without a plan. We got control of the airport because we had pre-positioned forces. We were able to start moving people out in 72 hours. We moved 120,000 people out, the largest evacuation in the history of this country.
Mr. Secretary, I will tell you that your DOD colleagues don't remember it that way. And I remember your face when we got that secret briefing during the midst of this, during the height of it. We all gathered in HVC. And I'm going to tell you, I think our memory here isn't as accurate as it could be. And I'll just leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. I'll never forget the fear in your face and I don't have anything else to say.
Gentlemen, let me just add, I think this is a very important issue the gentleman raised from Tennessee, and I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Secretary. I'll tell you what our investigation revealed, that Ambassador Wilson did not want a NEO. In fact, he punished his staff for even mentioning the word NEO. And it wasn't, we got from the DOD, as you indicated, on August 6, 2021, that the NSC said, National Security Council said, a NEO equates to failure, quote unquote. That is what was going on. A NEO equates to failure. Maybe that's because President Ghani, as you said, Mr. Secretary, but those are really the facts. And only until August 15th, the day that Kabul fell, think about that, the day that Kabul falls is the first time that Ambassador Wilson requests a NEO, and by that time, sir, it was too late.